certain that every one of us understood any kind of major change.
Okay.
Yeah, you had a
Oh, really?
All right, here we
you had a
go.
big backup sheet. Yeah. That would go with the agenda.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting and the Budget Board meeting, and I'm calling it to order at 6:02 p.m. Leo.
Well, we're all ready for you, Pat.
All right.
I second that.
This is a joint meeting with the Budget Board for the fiscal year 2019 municipal budget presentation and discussion of department capital requests and requests from town committees, outside agencies, and social services. So we've got a lot to cover because it's the budget from last week that we didn't have because of the storm, and this week. So don't drop your pencil.
Okay.
So, am I up?
You're up.
So first of all, I would like to make sure that everybody is using their microphone appropriately. We have invested a good deal of money in the equipment here, and I think that it works well if people use it appropriately. And so how close should I be to the microphone? So I should be a spread hands width away from the microphone. Don't be shy, it likes you, okay, stay close. And so if the budget board would also make sure they use their microphone, that would be very, very good, because we do have a lot of people who watch these meetings at home and they want to be sure that they hear everything that is said. So tonight, we have two agendas up here at the table. The blue one is the capital agenda, which we'll be doing first, and the pink one is the other agencies. And so if anybody wants a copy of the agenda, they can come up to the corner of the table. Tonight we are going to cover a variety of subjects to make up for lost time for last week, and I'm going to begin with the capital costs. We have a wide variety of projects covered under our capital budget this year. As noted, our capital budget is increased by about $144,000 from the fiscal year 18 budget, and it totals are higher. However, we have also an increase in the transfer from our capital reserve in fund balance, so of $150,000. So it's about a net zero in terms of impact to the tax rate. The thought process tonight is that we will go through these various projects, and that if people would begin by turning to your capital admin on page 213, we will begin there. And if people have any other questions that they have thought of as we go through the various departments, if you can let us know, whether it's Selectmen or Budget Board, because as you know, next week the goal is that the Selectmen will be voting on the budget. And so certainly if there are any follow-up questions or issues, we'd like to know about those so that we can get you the information needed. So I am going to ask Tracy O'Rourke and Werner Gilliam to come up. Is Werner here? There he is, hiding back there. In the capital outlay for administration, we have two items this year. One is the historical preservation, and I'll have Tracy speak to that.
Good evening. One of the most important but sometimes least recognized jobs of the town clerk is preserving the town's records. And because it all happens behind the scenes, sometimes people forget that it's there and needs to be done. But restoring these books is preserving the town's history, so it's a very important project, and I want to thank you for your past support. You've all been very generous over the years. April Dufault has done a wonderful job of creating the records preservation schedule, and I'm honored to keep it going and keep our history preserved. And I welcome any of you to stop by Town Hall sometime and take a look at the books. They really are beautiful once they're done, and they look very different from when they started. So it's definitely a worthwhile project. This current year, we restored 2 birth certificate books and 3 marriage books. And I'm again asking for $5,000 in the 2019 budget. We still have 4 marriage license books to restore, and then we'll be all done with the vital records, and we're going to circle back to the valuation books, starting with 1944. So that's basically where we're at now.
So we can basically do, for $5,000, 5 books.
It depends on how big they are. They range anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a book, depending on how many pages. But yes, this current year we did 5 books, and typically when we do the valuation books, we're able to do 4 in a year because they're a lot bigger.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Tracy. You're welcome. I'm asking Werner to come up. This year, we're not asking for any money for improvements to the town hall, but we do have a special project, and that is to look at our land use ordinances. And as part of our workforce housing or housing assessment study that we did earlier this year, one of the strategies that it was identified was to examine how our own land use and zoning is impacting the cost of housing and development, and some of that's related to the acreage size needed for a lot. On the other hand, we don't want to open up development town-wide and just increase development, and so we're looking to do this in a very strategic approach, and Werner will talk about that.
So, good evening, everyone. So, as you know, as Lori said, we're following on the heels of the housing study that was recently done, and specifically, what we want is we want a third party look at our practices, at our ordinances, to see and identify areas that could be improved, specifically for meeting our set housing goals that we've been looking at. But we want to be deliberate about it. We want to be specific. We want to make sure that we're not just opening the door to unintended consequences, and that's specifically what we're looking to study. So my expectation is that out of this we would not only just wind up with a list of items that we would specifically need to address, but I would also be looking to find some very specific language and recommendations on what to bring forward to the voters for possible changes and modifications.
Does anybody have any questions for Werner on that item?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Werner. Next up, we're going to page 215 to the police department, and Chief Sanford is here to discuss the vehicle purchase.
Good evening, everyone. I'm looking to replace the supervisor's vehicle, which is the Ford Explorer that we purchased in 2014. It's an all-wheel drive vehicle, has a lot more room in the vehicle. We've had very good luck. I shouldn't say luck. The vehicle has been very good. It's been low maintenance. It's important for us to have the supervisors have a larger vehicle. They carry some extra equipment, ballistic shields and things of that nature, entry tools, things that the normal cruiser actually doesn't carry. And in the price, you don't see an estimate for a trade-in because the old vehicle will be transferred over and kept in the town rolls to be used in the public works wastewater as a utility vehicle for them.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Going forward in the future, I would think it'd be better for us to have all-wheel drives instead of some two-wheel drives. But isn't the all-wheel drives, the SUVs, they have a lot more room in them?
They do, sir. And I would say I agree with you. I don't think the entire fleet probably needs to be that, but I did, when I was trying to price out a vehicle this year, Dodge may actually offer the all-wheel drive in the 6-cylinder. You only offer it in the 8-cylinder, and we don't need an 8-cylinder in this town. So next year I may have that as an option for me to be able to get the all-wheel drive, because in the situations we've had in the last 3 weeks, it's been pretty tough to get around, and we've used our other vehicles as well. So You know, I use caution with that, but I could see another one in the fleet, maybe half, would be appropriate.
I'd like to see a couple more in the near future, I mean, in the, the next
Yep.
couple of years, because I just think it's important to make sure the police officers are safe, and, all-wheel drive SUVs get around a lot better than the two-wheel.
They have a lot of gear that they have to carry, ballistic shields, ballistic vests, all kinds of specialty equipment. There's a lot in there that just isn't gonna fit all in a normal trunk, so. Yes, sir.
What vehicle, or do you use multiple vehicles if you have to transport somebody to Alfred?
It can depend on the person, depend on the situation, but all our vehicles are used to transport prisoners to Alfred. To include me on my way home every now and then.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, next we are moving to fire, and Dick Stedman, our fire administrator, is coming up, and we're moving to page 219 to review the fire capital request.
I'm Dick Stedman, Fire Administrator, and first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that much of the work in this budget was done by Acting Assistant Chief Jim Burrows, Acting Fire Chief Scott Lantang, who are both presently at an emergency call out in the western part of town. And it was a bit of there was also a number of meetings with the rest of the fire officers to try to determine what our present needs are, and the complex part being what the needs of the fire department are going to be in the next few years under a hopefully soon hired fire chief. And we think we've left enough leeway for the incoming fire chief to determine what he or she may wish to do that might be things that we have not foreseen at this point in time. It also served as an opportunity for us to take a very serious revised look at the future of the fire department. We know we're dealing with ultimately a shortage of volunteers as some of our present membership grows older. That would only be some of us. And we've been fortunate to be able to operate out of 4 stations with 12 trucks, largely in part due to private funding for much of those vehicles through the Kittredge Family Fire Fund, the Cliff Seavey Fund, and other things over the years. However, the cost of apparatus and so forth has eclipsed what those people all envisioned, so that as a result, the largest item in our budget continues to be a reserve being maintained for the purchase of large apparatus at $130,000 a year. We, over the last 4 years, have purchased 2 such vehicles, the most recent one arriving in town just a few months ago to replace an aging truck at Goose Rocks. And that also has led to us determining that several of our present vehicles, due to maintenance costs and so forth, are probably not ones that we will maintain, nor will we necessarily replace when the time comes. And these costs, whether the vehicles are used or not, include annual inspections, regular maintenance, driver training on them in case they are used, and a bunch of other things which are not free. And as a result, we are envisioning a more streamlined department that better meets our needs as we move forward. In that regard, we have just ordered a replacement brush truck to replace one at Cape Porpoise that is a legitimate antique. Dan, how old is it?
1974.
Well, you were a very young man when that truck was acquired.
I was purchased that with the Kittredge funds.
And it is, it's something that has become on occasion unreliable. It's a manual transmission vehicle that is not always easy to operate, and there are members who are not so skilled to do so. And it has, in addition to brush fire duties, it's also designated to pull our rescue boats, which makes it somewhat critical to start on occasion. The replacement is expected to be on board for that very shortly. And as a result, that concludes our immediate replacement of brush trucks. We had been seeking $30,000 this year and have realized that that's something that could be postponed and probably indefinitely. I think what we're looking at down the road a few years before any smaller vehicles are replaced. We've also become aware that due to a change in how the capital budget items were dealt with a couple of years ago, that monies not spent from these categories may be carried forward for future use. This has been particularly important in the areas of two-way radios, where there was not a model on the market that
particularly met our needs, so we were waiting for such a product to come out, which we believe is now available, and that will be pursued later this year, as well as our budget for PPE, or personal protective equipment, in other words, turnout gear. Sets are now expensive, very close to $2,000 per set. It's something that for very active firefighters should be replaced every 5 years. We've been doing pretty well with that project, but the ability to have that be a carry forward account automatically means that in a year like last year, where we did not need 10 sets of gear, we needed basically 3. We were able to save that money until this year, where we do have some new members and others whose gear has become older. And as a result, in those two, at least in the radio category, we're able to use, or we will be able to use, approximately a total of $34,000, including this year's budget and monies held forward from prior years, which will more than meet our immediate needs, plus allow us to replace either next year or the following year our base station radio, which is an extremely important piece of equipment. It will be 20 years old. We think it has some life left in it, but we don't want to be in a situation where it is it dies before we anticipate it. So that's something that will be coming up. This year we are still budgeting the full amount for turnout gear at $17,000, which again is it's not 10 full sets, but it gets up in that same range. At this point, what happens in subsequent years with both those budget items is an unknown, subject to what a future fire chief is going to prefer that we do. So this does give us quite a bit of flexibility in that regard. And a more immediate need under building improvements is we've discovered that the overhead doors on all but one of the truck bays at the Wilds District Fire Station are in an unsafe condition. They're supposed to, as they are being lowered, automatically raise up if it hits something. That is not happening, and that was discovered, fortunately, by it hitting the bumper of a truck and not a child. And so that's a kind of a priority for us to make sure they are safe. And really, there are no other unusual expenditures. We are looking at the beginning phases of replacing our self-contained breathing apparatus packs, which were are projected to begin to become obsolete in the year 2026. At that point in time, they will be 20 years old, having all been purchased in 2006 under what may not have been the best program to replace, at that time, a total of 45 air packs all at once, because it places the burden on the town to then do the replacement for those at the same time. So we're looking at commencing a budget on that. I think we're going to probably go very slow at that until we can confirm down the road and then whether or not they will need to be replaced on that kind of timetable. Any other questions from?
Yeah. Dick, Dave James.
Oh, where are you?
At the last
Oh,
meeting,
there.
I don't know whether it was, I think it was Laurie when she was overviewing the long-range capital plan, talked about the idea of extending the interval between purchase and repurchase of a new vehicle. And I was just wondering what the rationale for that was. Is it having to do with improved reliability of equipment, or does it have to do with demand and supply?
And you're referring to large fire trucks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think basically there's a lot of technological changes that occur on an ongoing basis. Many of them involve the safety of those riding on the trucks. There are a lot of electronics incorporated in doing that. You basically can't start or move one of the fire trucks until all parties on board are belted in and things of this nature. And that's a relatively minor provision, but there are also advancements in other things built into the truck, foam systems allowing us to extinguish fires more efficiently, just a variety of things. And most of the trucks, the larger trucks, save one that we've had in recent times, were all purchased during the late 1980s or early 1990s through the Kittredge Fund, which at the time pretty much depleted those funds. When the Kittredges left the money to the town, they envisioned fire trucks that cost, what, Dan, maybe $50,000 in that?
Yeah, 50 to 100.
And therefore would allow the replacement of them on a much more frequent basis. We've found that now, our most recent piece of apparatus, the new engine at Goose Rocks, was $460,000 plus equipment. And as a result, we know the Kittredge Fund will continue to be there, and recent changes in its management have improved the value of the fund quite nicely. But at this point, it's dependent on investment return, and we don't really know where that will be. In the meantime, we still maintain several older trucks, which not all, as I mentioned before, not all of which will be replaced, but some, at least a couple of them are going to need to be.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
So next, Mike Claus is going to come up, and we're going to talk about highway on page 221 and the equipment replacement.
So for equipment replacement, we're looking at our trackless sidewalk machine. It's 2000, should look at my numbers before I say that.
2007.
2007, I was gonna say 2005. 2007, we've looked at it and we've used that quite a bit, and we think it's time, for reliability status, we think it's time to replace that.
You're talking about the snow blower rig?
Yes. And that's a fairly expensive piece of equipment. We decided to defer replacing any of our smaller pickup trucks. Bob's gone over those and done a good job. Just put a new rocker cam in my engine, $4 part, saved us having to blow up an engine. But he heard a little knock and replaced the cam and was done in a day. So I'm happy about that. And Bob is off. You would see Bob here tonight, but he is off on vacation, off to the Caribbean. So, a well-deserved one. So, for equipment, that is what we're looking at. Our fleet's in very good shape otherwise. So, go ahead.
The trackless, is that the same vehicle that you use for a lot of the mowing?
Yes.
And for brush alongside the road, so it's not just the snow blower.
That's correct. I should have mentioned that. It does sweeping. It has multiple attachments on it. It's basically a municipal tractor. It's designed to put a flail mower on the side of it. I can put a flail mower on the front of it. We usually sweep with it. You'll see it cleaning off sidewalks. It gets on the sidewalks and plow. We put a plow on it where we can't snow blow. It's a very versatile machine for us.
Are you gonna trade it in or sell it?
We're gonna try to talk you guys into letting us keep it in reserve, but I don't know if we'll get away with that.
Good luck with that.
We'll try. We don't plan on trading it. We would either sell it.
Mike, will you be able to reuse the implements that are on this track list for the new one, or will you have to purchase new?
We are going to specify the new one that it would have to accept our existing snow blower. I don't know if you remember, Russ recommended that high-capacity snow blower that works really well, and that's only like 6 years old.
Something like that.
Yeah, and it's in very good shape. It's a great snow blower. So we're going to specify that they have to provide a machine that's compatible with that.
Good.
Mike, I'd just like to thank you for being a North Street resident. I got 8:30 yesterday morning to snow blow my driveway, and North Street sidewalks were already cleared. So great job.
And Ricky volunteered for that one after a long night of plowing. We were quite happy that he did.
Yeah, you guys have done a great job
Yeah, really.
this winter.
Thank you.
The
For all the
camp
snow we've
station,
had in the last 3 weeks, did a great job.
Yeah, and whoever the gal is. I noticed that. I was surprised to see those.
Well, very good.
Doing that great, she's doing a great job.
That's Michelle Martel. She's doing a wonderful job.
Michelle's doing a great job.
Yep. So that's, do we want to move on to roads?
Yep, let's move on to page 221. So, we will, we're gonna move on past 221. The next page, 222, you just see our equipment replacement schedule. And, originally, the, other small, truck was on the docket for this year, but we, have moved that to, another year, the Ford F-350, just due to budgetary constraints. So now we are on page 223 with the road improvements, and a request of $717,000.
So, appreciate everybody that this is a very large number for the town. The idea here is to continue what we've been doing. We've been trying to get North Street and Mills Road completed, and that's obviously a big chunk of this. Keep in mind that half of this money that we're devoting to North Street and Mills Road will come back to us in the form of reimbursement from Maine DOT. But we have to cover that cost as an expenditure and then get the revenue back in. But that has to show up in these numbers to make the budgeting work. The rest of the program is all maintenance overlay. You know, what we've also tried to do is, along with these reconstruction projects, is look at our road surface management system. You know, we go out, survey the roads, determine, you know, take a good look at them for drainage, cracking, and look at the roads that we can overlay and forget about them for a while. And that's the idea. There's a lot of these small roads in town, we don't want to get to the point where I have to grind them up. You know, usually, if we ignore the roads, then you have to bring the big grinder in and fix them. With these overlay programs, if we get the road soon enough, when it just starts to show signs of cracking, we can overlay them, and you won't get as much reflective cracking back in, and the road will hold its shape. And I think all these roads we're going to overlay are in fairly good shape, but this maintenance paving will give them a good 10 years life before you have to even start thinking about them again. And I think that's an important thing for our overall health of our capital budget.
Well, Mike, are you also going to include curbing in that process?
So in the reconstruction,
Right.
in reconstruction, North Road and North Street and Mills Road, those are going to be paved shoulders for the most part. We'll put curb in where we've got hills or curves where it's going to help drainage.
Right.
Similar to what we did on, you know, the side of North Street where we don't have sidewalk, we put some curb in on the hills where it would help drainage and hold the road there. For the most part, I don't think we will need that much curbing on North Street, finishing up, going up to Log Cabin Road. Mills Road, it may just be in a few spots.
Well, you did curbing along Ocean Avenue and part of the ramp off of Wilds District, and it has not deteriorated at all.
Right.
I mean, it's saved the road.
So, and that's basically where we've got hills where we had,
Right.
had you know, and so it's individually where it's needed is where we put the curb in.
And on page 224, you see the spreadsheet that has, you remember last year, we brought you forward a 2-year plan to fall in love with the state biennium budget, since we were looking at a lot of state funding. So this is the second year of that 2-year plan, and you can see what they'll be requesting in the town meeting warrant, and then what the Maine DOT match will be, and what will be locally funded at the bottom of that spreadsheet. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Lori?
Yes.
Mike, last year in the fall, I noticed Arundel coming in, I think it was Arundel, came in with hot tar on a lot of the cracks in some of the roads. Am I right?
Well, that was 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
Last year, we contracted it out. We actually, we bid that work out.
Okay.
And we crack sealed Ocean Avenue from Dock Square out to Chicks Creek Bridge. Was crack sealed this fall. That contract price was actually less than what we were paying to purchase the crack seal material. You know, it was a company out of Massachusetts that specializes in crack seal, and They just bought their machines up and got it done in one day. Pretty good operation, and I think their economies of scale and where they're buying their crack seal material in bulk, they're able to actually undercut local suppliers of the asphalt material. And we checked their quality, and we kept an eye on the work they'd done previous years, and we were quite happy with that. So we're continuing our crack seal program, but it's going to probably be contracted out as long as these prices maintain. You know, if they suddenly raise their prices, we could go back to doing it ourselves.
Good, thank you.
So on page 225, you have the sidewalk plan.
And those once again, those sidewalks, I'm basically counting that for the paved shoulders. You know, we're wide, you know, those are in, we looked at North Street going out towards, from Patton's out to Log Cabin Road, and just didn't feel that the room in the shoulder, there wasn't enough room for sidewalks and shoulders. You've got those trees going along, and the poles in the houses are tight to the road there. So we will have, you know, a good 5-foot paved shoulder for people to walk and ride on. Hopefully it will work out well.
Any questions on sidewalks? If not, I'm going to keep Mike up here, and we're going to move to special projects on page 233. So this year in special projects, we talked to you about the Ocean Avenue project, from the Nonantum basically to Chicks Creek. And on page 234, you have that construction estimate done by Woodard and Curran, as well as a few pictures of Ocean Avenue. And our request this year is that this would be an authorized bond project. There would be no funding required in this budget. However, we will be placing an article on the warrant for the bond and be asking the budget board and selectmen to weigh in on that. But in the capital budget itself, we are asking for the engineering funds. And do you want to talk about that project?
So we've been keeping an eye on the concrete wall along Ocean Avenue between the Nonantum and basically Dana's by Sonny's, across from Sonny's from Port Lobster there. And it's been in rough shape for a number of years now. Originally, we were looking at raising the road there, and that cost ended up getting to over $2 million if we tried to rebuild that whole section of road and raise it up above the floodplain. Plus the issue of, you know, are we creating a dam on Ocean Avenue where the properties wouldn't be able to drain in case, you know. It just wasn't an easy thing to do. But I think the time for that wall along the sidewalk is actually a concrete retaining wall, and it's failed down at the base. And it is basically time to replace it. So what we're looking at is doing an engineering design where we're going to replace that retaining wall and have a guardrail system similar to what we've got. And we haven't got the actual design of the railing system, and that'll be up for discussion. But we put enough money in the budget to get a good rail system. You know, in the budget that they've done for construction, there's enough money to get several different types. You can look at several different types of railing systems. But what we looked at is that wall will be raisable. So basically, we'll be able to, whatever guardrail we put on top of that wall will be bolted into the concrete. We'd be able to unbolt it. The wall will be designed to modularly go up with a section of concrete. So if we needed to raise the road at a later date, we'd simply unbolt the rail, bolt in a new concrete precast section onto the wall, and raise the road. So I think that's our best bet if we do run into issues where the road becomes washed out with regular high tides and we do need to raise the road, we'll have that ability to do that in the future.
Speculative question, Mike. Will you have to replace the retaining wall all the way down to, how far down?
It actually doesn't go that far down. It only goes like about a foot below grade. It's not a deep frost wall at all. It's just an L. It's just an L retaining wall. You know,
And will you have to tear up Ocean Avenue in order to put in tiebacks or something to hold the?
We're going to lose about half the lane. They do not anticipate using tiebacks. We're going to take one lane out.
Okay.
And the water district, since that's on the water district side, the water district is going to replace their line ahead of us.
Yeah.
So that's done for them.
Good. Okay, thanks.
So we're gonna go to Piers Budget on page 239. And as you can see, Mike is overseeing a lot of projects. You're staying right there, my friend.
Okay.
And we are asking for $130,000 to put into the reserve account for the Cape Porpoise Pier project. We're finishing up our government wharf project in the next month, and we are trying to prepare for Cape Porpoise Pier. So we did ask for some funds last year, and we have done some investigatory work as well as some initial design and cost estimate. And now we are preparing for a permitting process and final design. And do you want to talk about that project?
So Baker Engineering, who has been doing the work down at Government, doing the engineering work down at Government Wharf, I think the lobstermen down there are happy with the way that we've phased that so that they can keep working while we're building. He's been investigating what we could do at Cape Porpoise Pier, and in meeting with myself, Lee and Lori, and some of the lobstermen, just talking to him, you know, I think he has a good understanding of the operations of the pier and has come up with a good plan to replace the bait shed and get rid of the, you know, I went a little too fast here. The problem is that the bait shed and the harbor master's office are sitting on the old fill from the lighthouse, what was
From
on
the
the observation tower, excuse me, are sitting on that old fill, which was just basically rubble dumped under the building. And that's starting to fall back into the river, back into the harbor, excuse me. To fix that and keep the pier open, it would either be very expensive or impossible to do, to try to, because you're working in the same spot where the lobstermen are. So Barney took a look at that and came up with the idea of putting a new bait shed over the beach area, just to the left of the pier, and then turn that where the bait shed is now and the harbor master's office into parking. And the new bait shed would be pile supported.
So do you want to tell us why we're moving it?
So that we can keep operating while we're building.
So it's the FEMA flood maps,
And we have to meet the FEMA flood maps.
right?
So any new construction out there, if we fix it, would have to raise everything up. But if you think about that area, the area up by the existing parking lot is higher, significantly higher than, you know, it slopes down. So we pick up 3 or 4 feet right there, and he can build the bait shed up at that elevation, and just right out the end, they can drop the bait onto the existing pier and onto their boats. So there is a step. It is going to be a hoisting operation to get the bait onto the boats. But in speaking with the lobstermen, they think that it seems to be doable. I think, you know, I think it's still in the preliminary planning stages, It still needs approval from environmental agencies that have say over that. But I think it's a good plan, and that's how we're moving forward.
So this level of funding would assist us in moving the project forward in two ways. One is we need to do more work around the design. We've met with Army Corps of Engineers and DEP, and we need to go through that permitting process, and that could be likely a year to go through that permitting process. And so we need to do that, and then we are also looking to apply for state funds, because the project is estimated at about $2 million. The Small Harbor Improvement Grant that we were able to get for Government Wharf was $250,000 is the max. So we would be looking to be creative with DOT and hoping that they would see a way for us to fund this over a 2-year cycle and maybe be eligible for $500,000. We're looking at other grant opportunities. One was the Northern Borders federal grant. However, York County is not one of the main counties that would be eligible for that. We are also looking at submerged land grants and some other grant opportunities, much smaller dollars. So the thought process is that if we can get in line, we've asked them to save us a place in line for funding, but they're out to the year 2021 right now. So unless they get additional funding, and so when you guys vote for those state bond projects for infrastructure, that's where the Small Harbor Improvement money comes from. And the state's only been giving about $500,000 to that fund a year. They used to give $1 million or more. So the monies are much more competitive, and of course costs have gone up. So we think this prepares us to make sure that we're in line. We have a design that meets those requirements from the federal agencies and the state agencies, and then we would be prepared next year to talk to you about how much we actually think we're going to need.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The new pier, bait shed and what have you that's being done at Government Wharf, is that the same height above sea level as the proposed Cape Porpoise?
I think Cape Porpoise would be higher. We matched we matched the current flood requirements. With Cape Porpoise, we're looking at probably having to meet.
Cape Porpoise is in a velocity zone, so it's in a different zone, and the heights are different.
True, but we also, if my understanding is correct, those FEMA rules have not been accepted by the county or state or anybody else at this point. They're guidelines that they're aiming at,
No,
correct?
they're not guidelines. FEMA comes down and tells you this is the map.
Correct, but isn't the town, along with other towns, fighting
So
a
right
bunch
now,
of that?
we are appealing that.
Yeah.
And so, right now, even to meet the current flood maps, we would need to raise the level of the bait shed by 7.5 feet, just to meet the requirements in effect today. The new flood maps that they are trying to put in place would require us to raise it to 12 feet above its current elevation. So we are looking to appeal on a variety of areas in Kennebunkport. And what we have added to the list is Cape Porpoise Pier. And so we will appeal, and our goal is to get it down to the current level, but we'd still need to raise it. And if we can get it out of a VE zone, we may have more impact. So that's another piece over the next year. We are waiting for that appeal period to begin. But our Ransom environmental engineer is working on that as well, because we're hoping that will have a positive impact on that.
But I think what you're saying is even under the current rules, not the ones we're appealing, it's in a different zone type, just because it's oceanfront versus in the river.
Mike, Ted has a question for you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Ted?
Thank you, Leo. Will the $100,000 not spent in 2017 be added to the $150,000 in this budget?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, this is a reserve account, so any funds that aren't spent are kept in that reserve account.
Thank you.
Some of the reason the funds that you see in 2017 haven't been spent is because the government wharf project isn't complete yet.
You know, Laurie, I think you've done a marvelous job about using different sources so that the taxpayer doesn't get hit with a high percentage. And before we close this session of it, if you just, I know you've got it in here, but if you just run through that quickly for us, your different sources of revenue, it would be very good for everybody to know that.
On this particular project or in general?
In general.
Yep, so we can go through the revenue after we're done with Mike. How about?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead, Kai.
Oh, thanks. You said that then you would put parking over the current location of the office and the bait shed. Can you stabilize that rubble you said was going out into the harbor to do that?
Yes, and the issue is, once we have the new bait shed in operation, then we can, we're gonna lose some parking, while we stabilize that, but we wanna be able to get the new bait shed in operation, get the fishermen going, then we go over, demolish the old building, stabilize the base, and repave that lot.
We would have to excavate under the bait shed, which is one reason we will have to move it. Because once we remove the old bait shed, you have to replace it and meet the current standards. You can't go back. So yeah, we have to dig out from underneath there and replace that cribbing and replace the stone that's in there.
We don't know what that'll cost yet.
Well, that's part of that projected 2 million overall for all of that. Is there any other questions on Piers? So I'm going to ask people for Mike, because the Shade Tree Committee can't be here, if we can jump to our pink agenda and do Shade Tree on page 183,
Go grab my budget.
because Mike has to go out and load snow tonight at midnight.
183.
So it might be good if you could go home and take a nap.
183.
So page 183 is our Shade Tree budget, and Mike, along with his tree warden, Pat Briggs, will be reviewing the Shade Tree budget.
So, Shade Tree, Suzanne Stolman, who's done tons of work for the town, has given up her chairmanship. So we do not have a chair currently. We're working on the committee to get somebody to step up into Susan's shoes, and we hope to have that next meeting or so. So I'm here tonight representing the Shade Tree Committee. We have some changes. Bob Palmer and Tamarack Tree Service, Bob has retired. He's sold his trucks. He will still do some consulting work on the elms for us, but he's really, he's got some issues at home he's gonna take care of, and he's gonna enjoy his retirement as best he can there. But we're gonna have to move on from Bob as far as being our go-to guy for maintaining our shade trees. So we have bumped up the expert professional, because we'll probably be using consultants a little bit more than just using Bob and hiring Tamarack to go do it. We'll have a consultant look at it and then bring a tree crew in to do the work. So there's probably a little more consulting there. Planting is down a little bit, just based on what we're looking at for planting trees we're going to plant. Tree treatment is up a little. Bob has actually come up with some new ideas for elm tree, a Dutch elm resistant chemical injection that he wants to try based on some of the latest research that has come out. So that budget is up a little bit. Cutting and pruning is down. We just don't have that much cutting and pruning planned as we had thought of for last year. And fertilization, there's no change in that. And miscellaneous, we are up $3,500, and that is probably reflecting our fees on our. We pay for GPS license of the GIS of the tree, the tree program. We've added that in, So I think that's covering the annual cost of that. And we're recording more stuff, I think, with our program of working on deeds, getting deeds straightened out. So I think that basically goes over our tree budget.
Yeah, I think in general, the Shade Tree Committee's done a tremendous job, and Pat as tree warden has really taken us to new levels. But we are in a transition time period with Bob Palmer leaving and Suzanne leaving, who's been a long-term member. So I think we're in good stead. We've made a lot of changes. We've updated the software. We're tracking the tree data better so that as people leave, we still have that historical knowledge. And we are also really taking, I think, into account the needed paperwork, because when shade trees are on people's private property, we want to make sure we have easements in place, because we've invested in those trees, to make sure that they are there for the long term and we can manage them. And I think the tree committee's done a great job.
Lori, maybe I missed this, but have you selected a new company to replace Tamarack, or are you going to do it case by case?
Right now, we've talked, Bob gave us a list of tree companies to look at. We met with Kurt Walsdorf, who's an arborist, who had a arbor company, and he has retired from his active tree business. But he's a licensed arborist, well-respected in town, and I've asked him to give us a proposal to be our consultant. And he met with Bob Palmer last week, and they're planning on taking a drive around, and Bob's sort of describing what he thinks needs to get done, and hopefully we'll have a proposal for the selectmen to show how we're going to continue on with this. But that's
Well, and you're also using different vendors depending on the type of, if you have a tree removal or some major tree cutting, you're using some people versus if you have tree treatment, versus kind of that pruning and long-term goals.
There's only a few companies out there, Lucas Tree and a couple others, big ones, that will do the injection type work, will do the chemical work, so to speak. So we'll probably be having to use one of them. Locally, we've talked to Steve Bryant's done a lot of work for us on just doing small jobs, cutting and pruning, getting out there if a limb's in danger. Lucas Tree is available, and they work anytime a shade tree is in CMP territory. We've got a good relationship with CMP, where they'll bring Lucas in, and it's Tom Griswold is their arborist, along with Katie is Lucas's arborist, and Katie Menendez is their arborist. So we've got a number of people who are well respected, who have been working on our trees.
Anything you want to add?
Yes, just for general information, it is a critical time because of the change of personnel. And we have so much we're trying to get our arms around. It's like rebuilding your offensive line and your quarterback before the season starts. And you are really trying to pull it all together. Fortunately, Kurt Waltersdorf has worked for Bob Palmer for a few years in the past before he set up his own business. They are in contact at this point in time. And so there is going to be an exchange of information to make sure we don't drop in anything going forward. But it's still a process. So there are unknowns. And on top of all this, you have the storms that come through here and tear up trees and stuff. And between Mike's people and some of the other trees, we're really going to be quite busy. I think you'll see a seamless transition from what you see out in the community. You won't notice any difference, but we are like the ducks paddling like hell underneath the water, just to stay up. Thank you.
Pat, I'm glad you brought that up, because we've got a proud heritage in this community about trees, and we want to maintain it.
Absolutely.
And the ducks are not paddling right now.
Well, that's because you feed them, Dave. They don't have to paddle anywhere.
So any other questions for Mike? Because I'm going to let him go home and rest before tonight.
Okay, I'll take it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
All right, thank you for your indulgence. And Carol, we are up for Parks and Rec on page 227. So as you will remember from our budget discussions, we had asked for an additional $150,000 for the Parks and Recreation building because we had put the project out to bid and the engineers had given us a new cost estimate that was $150,000 more than we had originally estimated. And there were some reasons for that. Some of it had to do with the flooring we chose for the program space. Some of it was about building code changes that the state had made in the past year. But the large majority of that was just due to market price changes that they were seeing. So we did receive the bids yesterday. That snowstorm tried to stop us from getting those bids open, but we did, and we were very happy that we had 7 bids on the project. We had a base bid and we had 5 alternates on the bid. The base bid amount ranged from a low of $729,500 to a high of $961,800. So you can see that it was quite different. If we receive the $150,000 that we have requested, then with the lowest bid, we would be able to probably finish the project, but we have no contingency. So it would be very squeaky tight if we ran up against any issues. We are currently going through the references on the various bidders. There are some questions on the lowest bidder's experience and whether his references would want us to choose him. The second bidder is about $20,000 more than the low bid. And so if we were to choose that bidder, we would be looking, I would say, for $175,000 instead of the $150,000. If we wanted to give us a little contingency on the project, we would probably be asking for $200,000. Now we have right now $536,893 in the capital reserve fund balance. And so I would still be requesting that we transfer whatever we ask for out of that fund. So it wouldn't have a impact on the budget, and our hope is that we would not spend all of that, and if we didn't need it, then we would leave it in the fund. But once we ask for the money and we start the construction project, there's no going back at that point. So do you want to just talk in general about the project and how it's been this past year doing the design and your excitement level at getting it started?
Well, it certainly has been a very interesting process. Anybody that's been here knows that we have never gone after anything of this magnitude. And the process has been very exciting. The numbers, not so much. You know, I would love to have come in and been able to say that the numbers came in lower than what we anticipated, but that just isn't the case. So what we're looking at is a building that has the things that we need to take the building, to take the recreation department into the future. It also is what we probably needed 15 years ago but didn't have. So it's a building that suits our needs. It's not an extravagance.
So one of the addendums on it was that originally we were going to have 2 start dates. One was this spring and one was this fall. The second one was this fall. And as we got closer and closer to this date and we were hearing about the project costs and how busy everyone was, we decided to move the second date. So the first date would be to start this summer, and the second date would be to start next spring, spring of 19, thinking that we could line up people who did not have work in advance. So when we got so just speaking about how market prices continue to increase, we thought that would be a deduction on the bid, and it ended up being an addition if we moved the date. The low addition was 25,000 and the high addition was 50,000. So you can see that the market is telling us that prices are just going up, up, up. And we've seen that over the last year from our first estimate to now going to bid, and if we wait any longer, it just seems to continue on that incline. We'd like to, and in fact, one of the bidders said to us today, if we could move the date even further up, he could find some cost savings in just being able to buy materials sooner. The issue is I don't have the money in hand because we don't have the June town meeting, but you know, that is an impact we're seeing in this particular project.
What's a timetable on this? How long would it take to construct?
We had talked about a 5-month construction period, certainly giving people that time period in case they needed it, and maybe it could be done even sooner than that. But that was the time period we were giving people to construct it.
Don't you have the 500,000 that's already been approved
Right.
to
We could
start?
certainly financially start it, but the thing is, if the selectmen authorize and I sign a contract for a total amount, and I don't have that funding in place, you know, that could be an issue. What if the town voted no on the amount? And I sign.
You do less.
Then I do a half a building.
Can we have a special town meeting?
We could have a special town meeting and get authorization, yep.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Right, because when they said that, I'm like, sure, let's start earlier. And then the engineer goes, but you don't have the money. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
And Laurie told me, and I go, well, that's a no-brainer.
Lori, how soon do you think that you'll award the bid?
I would like to have it on the selectmen's agenda for next week.
Do you want to do a special town meeting before that time, or next time?
Well, Tracy left, so sure.
Sure.
That's what happens when you leave
Yeah.
early.
Yeah, right.
That'll learn you.
Right,
I
Stuart?
think there's a sensing that, you know, because of the advantages of savings, we should look into this.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads in there. Nobody's going like that.
We got enough people to have a town meeting here now.
True. I'll leave it up to you then.
You're the chairman. think
I
we should
know,
have
but
one.
Right, so if people think that's a recommendation, you guys, you're all in meetings, you can take and
vote.
give direction. But if that's something you wanna pursue, then that's something I could talk to Tracy about tomorrow, and we could move forward with a special town meeting to get authorization.
Well, I think the budget board would speak first on this subject, right?
Well, Laurie, how much of the savings by moving it up further?
The number that was thrown out today, keep in mind, this is all just talk at this point, was $10,000.
I think the bigger issue is let's get it done. You know,
Yeah.
we owe it to the
In
children.
the
and-
summer, get it finished.
Yeah,
In a
because
good
the
way.
sooner we have it, the sooner we can use it.
So we've gone through the permitting process. The issue is we need a building permit from Werner. And otherwise, we can begin. So I think they were looking to try and begin in April was the time period that they thought. But it's, you know, $10,000 on a project like this is nothing to shake a stick at. We'd certainly welcome savings like that. It's not like it's going to decrease it by $100,000, but it's enough that I would say it's worth our time and effort.
Again, I think the biggest thing here is the use of the building. If we can get it done sooner, then we can use it.
Would you like a motion from the budget board?
Yes, please.
Would somebody make a motion?
I make a motion.
Move to hold a special town meeting.
Second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you, Leo.
Yeah.
The board,
I move to have a special town meeting.
Second.
all in favor?
Now we just need to pick Carol up off the floor.
What we need to do is,
After her history in this town.
So the other thing that I would need you guys to vote on, because any warrant article has to have your recommendation. So I'd either need to wait until you meet again, to get your recommendation, or you could vote on an amount you're recommending for the warrant.
What would be necessary? What would you need?
I think, to be conservative, I'd be looking for 200,000 from the capital reserve fund.
Do we have a motion? Dave?
Yeah, I would support the $200,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded to support $200,000 from the capital reserve fund. All those in favor? Those opposed, Dan? No?
I'm not excited.
He's not excited, but he's all right.
I'm not excited, but I will make the same motion. We're into this, we need to get it done.
Right, okay.
So my goal would be to certainly not spend that 200,000. And that, I think that we talked, but we need to choose a bidder before we start talking about value engineering some of these things. And that's just, I can't get ahead of myself because that can get us into legal trouble. And so right now I need to focus on the bids I have in hand, and I think I should be requesting what I know that will get the job done. And then we can work on saving those funds.
I've got a motion and a second for a $200,000 transfer from the capital reserve fund. All in favor?
Okay, so we'll work on setting up a
Poor
special
Carol's
town
been
meeting.
living in rented houses long enough.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tracy's gonna say, you did what?
I know.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. I don't want to be in the office in the morning.
We just have to hold Warner's feet to the fire for that permit.
Yeah, I think we'll get a permit.
That's right.
Won't we, Werner?
I think he's gone.
He's gone already?
He's gone, I sent him home.
Okay.
Yeah, we're the only ones who have to stay to the end.
If, Leo had asked to just review the revenues, if you go to page 53 or your green sheets in the front of the book, I'll just go over the non-property tax revenue analysis real quick. If you look on page 55, you will see the graph of our revenues. And certainly in the state of Maine, property taxes are the way in which local government is funded. In many other states, there are other taxes brought to table, whether they would be a sales tax or a local income tax or other types of revenue. In the state of Maine, none of those are allowed by law, and so we are allowed to charge for services, and we are allowed to charge property taxes. And that causes a lot of that conflict between local government and its residents. In the town of Kennebunkport, you can see that 85% of our revenue comes from property taxes. In most Maine towns, it's not uncommon to see 3/4, 75%, so we're a little higher. And that is due to the fact that we have a high valuation, and so you can see that intergovernmental revenue is 2.56%. So for example, we don't qualify for any state aid in education, our local revenue sharing. I mean, the state aid has dropped in all areas, but state revenue sharing is one of the last strongholds, and we get very little there, and that has to do with our valuation. In general, the revenues are fairly flat. We worked to keep them flat this year. There were some increases, and I'll just go through them, starting on page 57. 57 is just what the estimate of additional property taxes that would be needed. And that covers both county and school as well as municipality overall, and that's just an estimate at this time. On page 58, you'll see our excise taxes. And we hit a low a few years ago with excise taxes when the economy really took a hit. And you can see in 2017 we budgeted $850,000, and this year we are estimating at $940,000. So we have certainly seen that come back strong, and the values of vehicles are higher, and that impacts that. Our boat excise is also in that category, and that's fairly flat to last year. The next category on page 59 is our intergovernmental revenues. So state revenue sharing is based on how the state does in sales tax. And once upon a time, the state in law, and it still is today, that 5% of state sales tax will go to municipalities. The governor has been sure to curtail that and keep those revenues at the state level. And so we get a much smaller percentage today, and you can see we're at 55,000. If we were at the full 5%, the monies are then distributed based on a calculation of population and valuation across the state. And we would probably be up in the $125,000 range rather than 55. Homestead exemption is at 65,000. So the homestead exemption is what you get if you're a resident. And if you are a resident of Kennebunkport and you have a primary home and you do not have a homestead exemption, then you should see our assessor post haste, because April 1st is your deadline. So in the past, the homestead exemption was $10,000 in value. The state has increased that to $20,000 in value. But the state is reimbursing us at 62.5%, so a little more than half. Where does the other half come from? It comes from you. So you are paying, and the businesses are paying, and the non-residents are paying to help give a little decrease to those who are residents of the state. So that's the portion we will get back from the state of Maine on our homestead amount. The next category is local road assistance, and we have state roads going through town, you know them, and we maintain them for winter maintenance. And because of that, the state is supposed to reimburse us on a per lane mile, and that has been decreasing over time. We are at the absolute 1989 minimum amount they are forced to reimburse us at now, and that is at $42,000 a year for plowing and maintaining those roads all winter. The tree growth is a calculation based on a per acre basis, and we get $6,000 in state revenue there. And the veterans exemption is a similar exemption to the homestead. Individuals apply for that, and we apply to the state, and they give us a portion of that tax in relief back. The general assistance is another state revenue, and that is with Allison's program with general assistance, and they reimburse us on a 50% basis. If we go to page 8, intergovernmental continues, and we have a Betty reimbursement. Betty is a business equipment tax exemption reimbursement for businesses that support new investment in business equipment. And you can see that we get very little there. They have to qualify and apply, and we just don't have a lot of commercial industry here. The Rachel Carson Wildlife is a payment in lieu of taxes for the federal lands here in Kennebunkport. They are not required to pay that, but have. The RSU COP share, we have a school resource officer that Kennebunkport employs, and the school reimburses us a portion of that cost. And each year we give them the amount that is required, and that really comes from the school funding. Here is remember Mike was talking about all those road projects, and so the DOT reimbursement is shown here, and this year it's estimated at $277,000. If you go to page 61, these are the charges for services. So charges include interest on taxes, town clerk fees, dog licenses. Agent fees are the $3 we collect when you come to register your vehicle at the town office. If you register it at Bureau of Motor Vehicles, you don't pay that fee. Building permits, and building permits have been increasing. We've seen a lot of development. You'll see that we're actually looking at a slight decrease this year. We've kind of seen that level out, and some of that's based on activity as well as valuation of the construction. Plumbing permits is our portion of that as well, and we're seeing a decrease there. Board of Appeals fees are based on whether we have a Board of Appeal application or not. So we do budget a small amount of revenue there. Page 62, we continue on charges for services, and we have planning board, liquor license fees, vitulers license fees, parking violations, which are a higher amount, about $45,000 a year. Police special detail is when someone hires the police for a a festival or public event, and we have to pay those officers when they go out there. That comes out of the expense line. And when we charge for the officers, it comes here in the revenue line. Kennebunk Light and Power uses our dispatch center and pays us $5,000 a year for that. We have the Goose Rock Speech stickers, and we're estimating about 110, seeing to keep about the same amount as last year. Any donations for nurses' fees, we have as a revenue there, a small one. Sometimes people give us a small donation. And then on page 63, you'll see the recreation fees. There's a decrease there of $205,000, and that is relative to the special recreation fund that we've set up this year. And so we're not seeing those expenses on the expense side, and we've taken the revenue out as well. Last is the Shellfish licenses, and we're about to do Shellfish licenses next week. On page 64, we go into our miscellaneous revenue account, and you'll see here we have recreation concessions, police miscellaneous if we sell any unclaimed property. Our investment income, we are doing pretty well with that. In fact, Jen just gave me the number today was 2.36% on our checking account. And we also invest funds in CDs, etc. If we can see that those rates will be better than our sweep account. But we have been working with Camden National Bank, and certainly rates have started to increase a little, and we're seeing some of that here. Miscellaneous income is just unanticipated income, and we budget a certain amount each year. The use of the fund balance we discussed is a decrease, so we're looking at 225 this year, trying to get to that 200,000 target goal. The next item is the Dock Square transfer. We transfer in some revenues from our Dock Square account each year to offset expenses in running it to the general fund. We have the Conservation Trust makes a donation to in payment in lieu of taxes, similar to the Rachel Carson. And then we also have a transfer from the sewer fund, similar to Dock Square, to offset those expenses relative to the sewer budget. And then we have the sale of the town property. In here you'll see $15,000, and that's the 2007 trackless that Mike talked about tonight. Looking to sell that, and that fund is here. We also, he asked if they could, and you can change your mind, but right now it's in the revenue. You'll see Maycomer transfer is from the Maycomer Trust Fund. The Dock Square parking lot equipment transfer is transfer to help pay for the new trackless. And then the Pickavit Fund is to support the new heating system in the Health and Police Department. The capital project transfer in is that fund that we've been talking about in relationship to the Parks and Rec building. And if we do a special town meeting, then we'll take both of those, the expense and revenue, out. And then the transfer in for recreation revenue of $80,000. So remember, we set up the special recreation fund. The expenses and revenues will go over there, and then the plan is to transfer $80,000 back into the general fund to offset our fixed costs of salaries. So the last transfer on page 99 or 66, I guess. Is the Dock Square transfer for the restrooms. So we pay for the maintenance of the restrooms in the general fund budget, and then we transfer funds in from the Dock Square account to pay for that. Any question on the revenues?
Well done, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so if we don't need a little break, then we are going to move along to our pink agenda sheet, which is the review of the town committees, social service agencies, and outside agencies. So the first one on that is on...
Lori,
I'm sorry.
can we take a break?
Absolutely you can, sorry. We'll take a 5-minute?
5 minutes max.
5 minutes? The line forms over there.
Lori, can I look at that, or is that sensitive until you show
And we are...
Well, you keep up doing
Thank you
just
so
what
much.
you can.
I really appreciate it.
You've done it perfect.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats so we can return to the budget board tonight and finish out before midnight.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
Oh, please, yes.
Glad I don't have to get up and go fishing tomorrow.
Where were we, Laurie?
So we are back, and we are reviewing the pink agenda, which is the town committee, social service agencies, and outside agency budget requests. So right now, we are at the Conservation Commission on page 81. And representatives of the Conservation Commission cannot be in attendance here this evening. But we are looking at a decrease in their request of $1,665. The reason for the decrease is last year we had increased the request because of a one-time grant share with Southern Maine Regional Planning and Kennebunk and Arundel to do a water quality study of the Kennebunk River, and that is currently going on. But we did not need those funds again this year. However, this year we did ask for $1,240 for a portion of the water quality summer intern. So I talked to you about the intern positions, and 80% of the time will be spent at the Goose Rocks Beach water quality study, trying to better understand where those bacteria counts are coming from. 20% of the time would be spent with the Conservation Commission. The projects they have going on are related to understanding the impact of fertilizers and pesticides on water quality, and how other communities, some communities are banning them, and they would like to better understand how that is working for those communities, as some people have recommended that we do that here, and talk to them about enforcement and the success rate they're having. So that's what the salary increase would be here for the Conservation Commission. One other exciting project that you won't see here, but is part of the Parks and Rec building, rather than just, in our current bid, we don't have any bid money, but we do in our budget money for landscaping. And rather than just do what they normally throw up for landscaping, we're actually working with the Conservation Commission to do a best practices garden around the building. And so to look at how, really good soils can decrease the need for fertilizer, how drainage can be impacted and improved with the use of certain plant materials. And so the Conservation Commission has agreed to work with Carol on that, so it'll be a showpiece for the community.
Nice.
Good.
Like that.
Any questions on that?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay, I am going to jump us to page 187, to the Cemetery Committee, because Ruth Fernandez has been sitting here patiently, and I'm going to call her up to the podium to talk about the cemetery budget. And I would say the big change in the cemetery budget this year is also salary and wages. And that is because we are looking for an intern to help with some property records with the town, but also with a cemetery project. And do you want to talk about that, Ruth?
Sure. Usually our budget stays the same. It's to take care of brush and trees in the cemeteries, and then improving the headstones that are broken, gluing those, getting those glued, or replacing them. This year, it's all been the trees. We had this one tree, we had a tree fall down. Luckily, it caught up on another tree, and then another tree fell down on that. Luckily, they stayed caught up in the tree until Steve Bryant was able to come and cut them. And then the town actually took the huge, they were totally upended, took the roots out and everything. But it did not land on any headstones, which was a miracle. And the ones that are, this past storm out on North Street, this is all happening on North Street, those luckily fell outside the cemetery. So, again, not the headstones. But a lot of our budget money has gone into getting rid of these trees. And this is just in the big cemeteries. This doesn't even count for what we have, you know, if there's a tree in a smaller cemetery, work that needs to be done on that. But what Lori was talking about, and she's been very supportive on this, is to have someone come and GPS our cemeteries. The cemetery committee has maps, but they don't really tell you exactly where the cemetery is. And we have Clary Nickerson's book, cemetery book, which gives descriptions, but it's the description of the, you know, you go by the yellow house and then there's the big oak tree and the yellow house isn't yellow anymore, the oak tree's not there, and so we have tried to find all these cemeteries. Once the cemeteries are found, there are cemetery issues, like you can't, you're not allowed to build within 25 feet of a cemetery. You're not allowed to disturb the ground within 25 feet of a cemetery. And so that means we have to know really exactly where those cemeteries are. Thus, an intern, hopefully, would be able to go around and GPS our cemeteries. So we would have an exact thing, and I think this would really help Werner too in his dealings with property people. Besides the fact that this intern could do other research about the people in the cemetery.
One of the issues we've had is sometimes people come forward, and we have about 75 cemeteries spread throughout town. And people will come forward and say, you know, I'm a descendant of XYZ person, and I'd like to go in, and state law does allow them to go in and do maintenance on that. But if we don't know exactly who's buried in that cemetery, it's hard to determine whether or not that person has a legal right to go in that cemetery or not.
Right, and we actually, we started on both these projects, trying to list everyone and trying to GPS. Well, the GPS we had broke, and the next one down the line that one of our members was able to use is just too difficult to use. And the person who started listing all these people, and we wanted to do it right, it just became too big a project. So this is something that hopefully a younger person with a lot of energy and technical know-how will be able to deal with.
Ruthie, when you're listing people, cross-reference Frost with Clary, there were some discrepancies in the two books.
Yeah. We are trying to update Clary's book also. Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move to page 137, and Jim Stockman, president of the Kennebunkport Emergency Medical Services, is coming up to speak to us about the CHEMS budget. And Jim brought with him tonight an updated sheet for the CHEMS budget, and it is some numbers were a little off in the budget you have in your book. And so everybody, we passed it out at the break, should have this one-page sheet that has colors on it. And I'll let Jim go from here.
Thank you. For a number of years, CHEMS has requested $125,000. This year, we're asking for $25,000 more. I think you need to understand that CHEMS is a service. It is payroll-driven, and we do not bill unless we transport somebody from here to a hospital. It's the only time we bill. So our costs are going up like everybody else's. We had been paying our volunteers a stipend, discovered that in paying them that it was against IRS rules, and thus we now pay our EMS employees and drivers minimum wage, still paying per diem paramedics. We offer 24/7 top-flight medical for everybody here in town. To keep those people at Cape Porpoise Station is costing us somewhere around $175,000 a year, even if the ambulance doesn't go out the door. So this additional $25,000 is a very small number in terms of covering our costs. The ambulance goes out. We just had a fire call. If the ambulance had gone out to support the fire department or a lost child or whatever it may be, and there was no transport, there is still a cost. And I feel that that is what this $150,000 that we're asking for the town is, to help defray that cost. And at the end of the year, if we don't have enough money, we go into our endowment in order to balance our books. And that's it. Any questions?
You explained it very well.
As I understand it, the reason, as you said, even if they go out the door, it costs that much. The purpose is that what you're trying to do is to bring the hospital expertise to the pickup point where you get the person. Mm-hmm. And you have to have people who are higher trained and more expensive to do that. But those are the things that save lives. Is that correct?
This is correct. And we need a very special paramedic. Not every paramedic can work in this town. We have a very special group. They can work by themselves, and they can work if all of a sudden help comes. We try to have a driver. We try to have the station manned by these two people. We do have a couple of volunteers that are still with us and still volunteering. But the other part of it is the cost of the equipment that is now carried on the ambulance. And every one of our paramedics are a paramedic. The driver EMTs could be a basic, could be advanced, but you're getting paramedic, and these people are special.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Jim, just out of curiosity, what is the size of the endowment that you have?
Our endowment is about $1.5 million, but we've been digging into it for the last number of years. One of the things that we're talking about now at CHEMS is how to increase our endowment. We are a nonprofit. We think we need to find ways of increasing the endowment. From the endowment every, Jim, how many years? Every year, every what, 10 years or 15 years we buy an ambulance?
About every 10.
About every 10 years we buy a brand new ambulance. That comes out of the endowment. We're now looking at $150,000 to $175,000 to $200,000. So that endowment is supporting a great deal and keeping us going. And part of it is that we bill at basically the standard rate within York County. So we're not the top, we're not the bottom. We've tried to do it. We are paying our per diem people a higher number because we want to attract them and we want to keep them. One of the things that we've instituted come July 1st is a how long have you been working as a paramedic with KEMS? And we're gonna give you extra money for that. So instead of your base, you go up a little bit more, and we're phasing that in because we want to, the paramedics and the per diem people, it's a very competitive in our county here. They go all over, and they all make a living, but they work this job here, they work that job, they work that job, and we want to be able to keep and attract our top quality people who can work with younger people coming up, for example, from University of New England or from some of the other schools. KEMS over the year, and I've only been on the board a very short period of time compared to some people. KEMS is very proud of the fact that many of our members today, our paramedics today, started out as a driver or as a trainee. And some of them gone on to become doctors. And you can trace it. It's quite fascinating. So that's what we do with the money, and that's why we've come to you for some additional funds. Did I answer it, hopefully? And
Yes,
I was.
you did.
Anything else?
Thank
you.
Well
done, Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So next we are moving to the Health and Welfare Social Service Agencies. So in your booklet under the tab Nonprofit Budget Requests, you will see the recommendations from the Nonprofit Subcommittee. And then on page 159, which is page 300, and on page 159 under the Health and Welfare tab is where those amounts show up in your budgetary line items for a total of $22,400. So I thought we might begin by going to page 300 and asking the Budget Subcommittee to just give us an overview.
Okay, you didn't tell me we were gonna do that.
I surprised you.
You can do it.
It's pretty straightforward. We had requests from the social services, 11 of them this year, which is the same number that had requested funding last year. Just quickly, American Red Cross, Caring Unlimited Church Community Outreach, Day One, Home Health Care at Home, that's Visiting Nurses Association, Kids Free to Grow, Maine Behavioral Health Care, that's the old CSI organization, Sexual Response Services, Southern Maine Agency on Aging, York County Community Action, and York County Shelter. In fiscal year 2018, this subcommittee made a very detailed review of all of those agencies to determine that they were in fact providing what we had defined as life-supporting social service activities. As a result of that, one of the ones that was questionable at the time was the senior center in Lower Village, and at that time, last year, we made a recommendation that really ought to be moved to the miscellaneous other agencies, which the town did approve and did do. So we're talking about these 11 agencies. 10 of the agencies requested exactly the same amount of funding that we approved for them last year. The only one that requested a increase was the American Red Cross, who was asking for an increase from $500 to $1,000. We thought that in reviewing everything and looking at the amount of support they actually provide to Kennebunkport residents, that increase of $500 was not to be supported. So we recommended a total of $22,400 for those 11 agencies, which is exactly the same amount that we recommended and was approved in the budget for fiscal year 2018. Any questions? Kai Leffler will be happy to answer.
Looks good from this side of the table.
Right, it's good.
Yep. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
I remember the old days when we used to fight all this out right here. You guys are great.
So if we could just pause there for a minute. I know that there are perhaps some agencies in the room who have come tonight. Arlene forwarded everyone the budget committee's support documents and what they were recommending, and didn't know if the board wanted to give anyone an opportunity to speak to any request or ask additional information, but I know there are some representatives here.
I don't have a problem with it.
No. My recommendation, though, is if we're gonna give you what you want, good to keep it brief.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yes.
No need.
Yeah, less is always more, especially when we're having a double meeting
Why
tonight.
keep drilling if you've already struck oil, right?
Yeah. But I think we're all quite intimate with one another over the years here, and we think you all do wonderful work, and we certainly thank you, and we're proud to support you.
So the only one in that group that did not, you're not recommending what they requested was the American Red Cross.
Correct.
Yep. And is there any representative from the Red Cross here? No. And so I'm assuming nobody else has any dire need to speak.
So the center,
You know, when they give me what I want, I
Yes.
keep my mouth closed.
You're smarter than I am.
right, right here.
The center is under miscellaneous.
Right, okay.
Yes,
all right,
yes.
Right, I'm sorry.
Although we don't have any special representation of that, we did recommend that we stay with the amount that was approved last year for them. And if I recall right, that was $2,500. We had quite a debate last year, as I
Right.
recall.
2250. I think we split the difference in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was a fair.
You guys wanted 2,000, you wanted 2,500, and we split
Split the
it between
difference,
two.
right.
Right,
Right.
No, we don't need to fight that one.
yeah,
again.
2250, right.
So if you go to page 211 in the budget, that is where the miscellaneous agencies are funded. And I'll give you a second to get to 211. Under miscellaneous agencies is the Memorial Day, and that's the contribution to the American Legion. It looks like an increase this year just because they didn't request funds last year because we had rained out in the previous year, so they kept the money forward. But now they're asking for their funding again for the Memorial Day Parade. And the Dock Square Monument is the planting of flowers. Their request is up $75. And then the 4th of July is the fireworks cost we share with the town of Kennebunk. New this year that the subcommittee discussed was the Southern Maine Veterans Memorial and the Life Flight. I don't know if you guys have any feedback on that.
Well, yeah, let me just, these were new requests, and they were not social service as much as they were miscellaneous agencies. But the Life Flight Foundation was requesting $868, and this is a new and first-time request to the town. The board recommends funding this foundation at the requested amount of $868. With the expansion of Life Flight services to York County with the helicopter program being based in Sanford, Life Flight's aircraft now provide service to all of Maine. Even before this expansion, 19 Kennebunkport residents have been transported by Life Flight support since 1998. Further, it appears that the service provided by this agency meets the definition of a Type A social service agency that provides life support services. As such, the board recommends that for next year it be moved from the miscellaneous agency to the classification of a social service agency. Any questions about that one?
No,
So that's a new
wonderful.
addition to the budget.
I think it's a great one.
Southern Maine Veterans Memorial Cemetery Association, this is another new request. They were asking for $1,000. It's another new and first-time agency request. The agency is a totally volunteer organization that supports and maintains the Southern Maine Veterans Memorial Cemetery located in Springvale, Maine. It's a nonprofit organization that is not funded by either the state or federal money. It has an operating budget of $55,000, of which $20,000 is received by donations from towns and cities in southern Maine. According to their records, veterans of 13 Kennebunkport families are interred in the Southern Maine Veterans Cemetery. Given that Kennebunkport residents interred in the cemetery represent about 1% of the total of the board, the board recommends that Kennebunkport consider a support level of $500.
Sounds good to me.
Didn't you? Who went out there? Was it you, Kai?
I did.
I've been out to funerals.
Oh,
Yeah, it is really a beautiful and beautifully done piece of land. I think I still have some of the pictures on my phone. I've never been there, so, took a little trip. It's really, really very nice.
Well, all veterans cemeteries are funded by the federal government for support. So this is an overlay that allows them to do extra things at the cemetery that's not funded by the VA and federal system.
Great. I think it's awesome.
And the last item in miscellaneous on page 212 is the senior center Lower Village. And as you can see from the subcommittee's report, they have requested $2,750 this year, and the subcommittee is recommending the same level of funding as last year at $2,250.
Looks good to me.
Yep.
Does anybody have any additional comment on any of those items?
No, it's nice to see Lifelight and us support
Yeah,
the
that's a
Veterans
great ad.
Memorial
It's a great
Cemetery
ad.
as well.
Right.
Yeah.
There are a couple of there.
Yeah, I see Dr. Tilney in the back hiding.
Yes.
Smart man.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Sorry,
you have to go to the microphone.
apologize. My name is Pete Tilney. I'm an emergency physician. I'm one of the medical directors for Lifelight. There's two of us. I'm also the medical director of CHEMS, and I really appreciate the opportunity for CHEMS to speak. I think it's an important organization for the town, and we do provide great service for the town, and we appreciate it. In addition, for Lifelight, we have now, I review all the cases that come out of the Sanford aircraft as well as the Lewiston aircraft, and it's with some regularity that I see our residents being transported. And I think it's amazing what the teams do, in addition to what our teams in Kennebunkport do. It's a different kind of medicine. We're doing critical care medicine, taking patients, off the highways, off the islands, but we also, most of our transports are from small hospitals to larger tertiary centers. It's routinely we're taking patients out of Sanford and Biddeford and York down to Boston or to Maine Medical Center, and it's our residents that we're taking care of routinely. So I really appreciate your support, and we do it, obviously at Lifeline. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a comment. Pete was our first junior member about 100 years ago. And he went through CHEMS, became a paramedic. He started out when you were in high school.
In high school, yeah.
And then went through and became a paramedic, then went on to UNE and got his doctor, and he's back.
Fantastic.
Dan was my first preceptor.
Wonderful.
Yes, sir.
I think what Lifelight's doing is remarkable. And I hope it's all over Maine before we're through.
Yeah.
We've sent 4 patients in the last 4 hours, 6 today already. So
That's
we're
wonderful.
busy, busy all the time.
Thank you,
It's
Pete.
great.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right,
So, gentleman in the back?
yes.
I'm gonna follow Peter. Hi, my name's Mike Willett. I'm the pantry coordinator for YCSB. I feel like I should earn my seat here this evening. I just wanted to express my thanks to the town of Kennebunkport. This agency is very special to me because it also offers its services to myself, and now I'm employed by them. So thank you very much, and it was an interesting meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Laurie, I know what the YC stands for, but I don't know what the SB stands for.
Do you want to come explain? People are asking about your acronym and what it means.
York County Shelter Programs?
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? Yeah? Anything else?
That's it.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so if we go to page 195, we have representatives here from the Graves Library to talk about their budget. On 195, you'll see the request at 150,000, and on page 196 and 197 and 198, you will see information detailing their budget, as well as their introductory letter and some data on libraries of similar size and contribution amounts.
You can bring all three of them.
There you go.
Strength of numbers.
My name is Mary Lou Bucavalis. I'm the library director of Graves Library. As I was driving here tonight, I realized, like, I've been at the library for 20 years now, and just trying to think about all the things that have happened over the time that I've been here. The one thing that has remained constant is the support of this town, the Board of Selectmen, the Budget Board, all the residents. I'm in awe. I live in a town where the library isn't as highly regarded as the library here, and I just want to thank you all for that. It's just amazing to me that when we need things, the fire department was over a couple of weeks ago to pump out the basement. I had to call in the blizzard so that Lisanne didn't have to go over, Lisanne James didn't have to go over to the library to check because the burglar alarm went off. So the police went by. I mean, it's just, it goes on, and I just want to thank you all for continuing to support the library. We are happy to answer any questions that you have regarding our budget that we submitted this year.
Presumably, you've had a chance to read the background that we sent, talk about the impact of the new building. And
It wouldn't hurt for you to hit those highlights, David.
Can you summarize?
Yeah, I think essentially, but David Kling, President of the Board of Trustees of the library, and Alan Edwards, our treasurer, who has the real handle on the numbers. But essentially, we, as you know, hopefully you've all had a chance to see the new wing. That's now complete. If you haven't, please come over. It's up and running. We've got a few little things to do on the audiovisual in the community room, but that'll be done in a few weeks, and we'll be able to do all kinds of community events. The room itself is being used more and more actively for all kinds of organizations. So we think it's a great additional resource for the community that we were happy to be able to do without taxpayer dollars. The fact of the new building means that it has caused some of our expenses to go up in addition to the usual, inflationary driven pressures, electricity bills. I think everybody's experienced that in terms of what's going on. But we think that we will continue, rather, our fundraising efforts to maximize the amount we can raise through our individual fundraising activities, through some of the resources that we have now in the new wing, like the larger and new and improved book sale, will help us, we think, gain even more revenue from that activity, although it's going to take us a while to get that up to speed. So we're in kind of a transition year where the revenue opportunity from the new building hasn't really caught up to the expenses that we're seeing. But hopefully you'll be able to provide the support that we need. And in the long run, if we're successful with our capital campaign, we'll be able to pay off the financing we used, as well as perhaps increase our endowment and keep the sources of support in balance over time. So, Alan, anything you want to add to that part?
No, Alan Edwards. The addition cost $1.7 million, and we were able to raise $1.5 million towards doing that billing, which personally, I think that's an amazing effort on the board, Mary Lou, and everybody in town who supports the library. So, we still have a loan we have to pay off. It's going to be down to $200,000 at least by the end of the year, with some pledges that are yet to come in. And it's a beautiful facility, and we agonized over this budget because we knew it was going to be a larger increase than we historically have come to you for. So I think it's an amazing facility. I think the town's really benefiting from something that they will benefit for many years from this, so.
I just one question. On the rental income, is that because of the new facility?
Yep,
exactly.
The community room. Now,
Yeah.
it's $5,000.
Remember to stay near the mic, please.
Yeah, $5,000 is what we've budgeted. You know, so far we haven't had a chance to really implement too many events. I think once we get into the summer, people will start to realize that facility is there, and we will get some rental income. Whether we'll get $5,000 a year, that's probably a little bit ambitious, but
It's a start.
it's a start.
It's a start.
It's a start.
But we do have I believe it was given, a popcorn machine. So when the facilities are up and running, whatever. Ted?
You should have mentioned that for nonprofit organizations, there's no rental fee.
That's true.
Yeah, there's depending on the nature of the event, there is a security deposit to cover potential cleaning costs, but yeah, we hope that we'll see more not-for-profits use it. But Mary Lou would give you a very quick rundown. I mean, we're seeing the rooms being used by all kinds of folks, the town, you know, maybe the selectmen would like to have a meeting there sometime.
Rotary's using it.
Rotary's
We
using it,
really
so,
appreciate it.
yeah.
And the Shade Tree Committee.
And the Shade Tree.
It's very nice.
So-
Yeah. You guys did a great job in the room. You
It's
really
amazing.
did.
The whole edition is just truly
Impressive,
exceptional.
yeah, absolutely.
And I think we've had some conversations with Lori about potential ways, small, but maybe working together in other areas to do some cost saving and share some expenses, maybe on cleaning and things like that, so. It gives us an opportunity.
And if you want to buy a used book, you can come down on Saturday and buy books from Barbara.
If you haven't been to the book sale room, it's pretty good. It's very well stocked and it's fun, so.
And I would just like to comment that even though the library is a separate entity, I'm always amazed at what they can accomplish with the $350,000 budget that they're asking for. I have worked in many towns, and the library is usually a big part of the community. And Mary Lou is part of our team. I mean, I have often called and asked her to help us out in various ways, and she is always there. She never says no. And we're looking at new ways. She's working with Allison, and they're doing senior Tai Chi and yoga and balance, and she is working, the library is working with our Parks and Rec program on creating female empowerment for young ladies. We're looking at ways to use their new computer center to help get people signed up for email alerts and text alerts and Facebook. And, you know, she's always a generation of ideas. And I think that it should be noted, the number of volunteer hours. I mean, you would think when you go there and see these operations that they have all this staff. And if you look at their wage line, you can clearly see that they don't employ, or they're paying everybody below minimum wage. And it's really because of the number of hours that you can handle a budget like this and really do all that they do there. And lastly, in terms of their investment in that building, they never came to the town and asked for funding. I don't know a library in the state that didn't come at least with a 50-50 match request. And so we are very fortunate that they saw that need and took that challenge on, and that the board of directors and Mary Lou are can-do people.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's another treasure chest.
Next, we have the budget for Cape Porpoise Library on page 199. And Dick Smith is, I believe, speaking with Roma Pizza right now in Italy. So he sent in others to pinch hit for him, and you can see that the library request is up slightly, $1,275. I think Cape Porpoise Library is a treasure to that community and helps keep that part of our community and village alive. And would you like to speak to that budget?
Sure. I'm Loretta McDonald, and I'm on the Cape Porpoise Library Membership Committee, and I'm speaking for Dick Smith. And our participation is up 22% this year. We're very proud of that. And our librarian, Mary Ginkis, has all sorts of fun things going on at the library. And one of the things that I think we're most proud of, during the fall, we had we were without electricity, and she opened for 4 days with her volunteers from 8 a.m. to 11. We had crock pots going, and people were charging their electronics, and they had a warm place to go. So we're just happy to be a part of the community and be able to do that for our citizens.
And this year, for example, you guys opened up for Prelude.
Yes, we did.
People had a chance to be warm inside and watch the lights go on, and I think that you guys continue to bring life to that part of our village.
Yes, we're trying, and we really appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are moving to page 203.
Only in Cape Porpoise can you have.
And this is your Parsons Way budget. Barbara Barwise is representing Parsons Way.
Another hat. Small increase this year. And basically, it is just as it say. Actually, Louise Spang is our chair, and Gordon Ayer is also a member, a 3-person committee. It's for the continual eradication of the invasives and the removal of the poison ivy. It seems sad to have all those beautiful benches all dedicated to people and have them all come down and get a good old-fashioned summer rash. So we're requesting additional funds for those 2 purposes.
Fair enough.
Sounds good.
We thought we'd start over and do them backwards. No, I'm kidding.
Did you say you liked your position?
So we have finished this evening with all of the budget items. I would just stop for a minute and ask the Budget Board and Selectmen, before we look at the calendar for upcoming meetings, if there are any questions or more information you need on anything we have covered to date.
No, you've been very thorough and detailed, and we appreciate that very much, Barb.
Very, very nicely
Yeah,
done.
very comprehensive and quick. Thank you.
So next week will be the
Yes.
Selectmen, you're gonna go over that?
Good evening, my name is Richard Legless. I'm a representative of the Southern Maine Veterans Cemetery, and I want to thank this evening in the Budget Committee. We've raised a lot of money in the past 5 years, and I just want to give you a little example of what we're working on right now. Another project, we're raising funds for a WW1 monument. This year, it's going to be held on November 11th, and it marks the 100th anniversary of the ending of World War I. Believe it or not, we've recruited a lot of students from the Sanford Regional Technical Center to work on this project. They are the ones who designed the monument and surrounding area. They will build the silhouettes, construct the wall in front of the monument, grow the flowers in the school, transplant them at the site. With the students' involvement, the cost of this monument has been reduced considerably. Funds for this monument are being sought for the service clubs with 50 miles of Springvale. Dedication of the monument will be on Veterans Day, November 11th at 11 a.m. Again, I want to thank you for your support. It really helps us. It's very difficult. This is my first year that I've been on the board and the committee. And we tremendously have over 1,000 people that have been buried there already. And if you don't know, their wives are also buried there. And we have people who don't want to be buried. We have what they call a wall, and we have boxes there where their remains go in those boxes. If you haven't visited that cemetery, believe me, it's quite impressive. And we have 3 phases, and we're working on the 2nd phase right now. And the first phase is not quite complete.
but we're trying to beautify that cemetery as much as possible. I first saw this in 2010, and believe me, it was very rocky, bony, and what they made out of it is tremendous, really. It really helps us tremendously, because the next cemetery, we have two of them in Augusta, and the next one is in Caribou. So we have all the veterans, no matter where they're from, whether they're from this area or from New Hampshire, we welcome them all. And I just found out today from the superintendent of the veteran cemeteries that people that are buried across from World War II, they will be honored in a certain area for the families in this area who want closure. So people that were buried across, I didn't realize that we had that many, but he was saying that we were losing as many as 1,500 military people, personnel, a day during World War II. So again, I want to thank the committee for helping us out. Appreciate your help. Thank you.
Got a question for you before you go, please?
Yes.
What is the capacity of the cemetery? I realize there's a difference between grave sites and columbarium and other things, but.
We have 39 acres there.
Right.
And some of that land was given to us by the town. And I know in just one area right now, we have over 1,000 burials in one area. So, and those are pretty much cremation, people who want to be buried there. Right. All the monuments are given by the government. They buy those monuments. And if there's I shouldn't say deficiencies, but if they're broken, cracked, or anything like that, they automatically destroy those and replace them with new ones. So the capacity, I wish I could tell you, but hopefully I can come back and give you that information, or I can email you with that information.
Well, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for coming.
So looking at our schedule that you should have in your books, next Thursday, March 22nd, the selectmen will meet prior to their normal meeting and review the final budget and take their recommendation votes. The following Friday, we will get out to the budget board their votes. And then on March 29th, the budget board will meet to review the final budget and take any recommendation votes. So then on April 5th, you should keep on your calendar, the Come to Jesus meeting, if we need it. But otherwise, we would be completed at that point. Then we would prepare the warrant and ask you to vote on the warrant articles.
So you want us here on the 29th at 6 o'clock?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. We'll be here.
Lori, for our meeting next week, will we post the selectmen's meeting at 7 PM? Or will we have it immediately following the conclusion of the budget review?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Call, Stuart.
We would have done that anyway. We did that the last time.
Who did the
There
Smiths?
was one time we did.
Move to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned.
All in favor? We are adjourned at
Going back to my
8:19. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
I didn't do so badly.
I
No,
don't
that was that one.
remember ever, 6 years I was on the board,
I was gonna say, you want to come in?
that any
Oh,
major
yeah. I am.
proposal, particularly change,
That's the good guy.
Yes.
current happenings,
I'm looking for a
was ever presented